Hello everyone, welcome to Vishesh Educational Videos. In this video, I am explaining about the notation for ER diagrams. Notations are nothing but the how to write a ER diagrams. What are the symbols you have to use while writing the ER diagrams? Right? ER diagrams are used in designing of a database. Right? So how to write the ER diagrams? In this video, I am going to explain the notations to write the ER diagrams. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Right, to get the notification of my new videos, please click the bell icon. And please don't forget to like the video, and please don't forget to share the video with your friends. So let me begin the explanation of notations. So to write the ER diagram, I have to use different notations for different objects, right? So this is the example for the ER diagram of a company database. Here this ER diagram contains some entities, some attributes, some relationship, right? So I'm going to discuss each notations in detail. Now see here. Here the first symbol for a entity, to represent the entity in a ER diagram. I told you, entity in a requirement document, to find out the entity you can go for nouns. Entities, to how to represent that entity in a ER diagram means you can use a rectangle. Here you can see employee is a entity, so how it is represented here using a rectangle. Not only that, dependent I will explain next. So project is a entity, department is a entity, all those entities are represented using a rectangle. So this is the notation. To represent the entity in a ER diagram, you have to use the rectangle. So weak entity type, to represent the weak entity type, you have to use a double rectangle, two rectangles. See, so here in this diagram, dependent is the weak entity type. So weak entity means dependent is nothing but a relatives of a employee. Relatives of the employee. Dependents are nothing but relatives of the employee. So companies collect the relative information about the employees. For example, if anything happens to the employee, they has to inform their relatives, right? That's why they collect that relative information. This relatives information is a weak entity. How it can be a weak entity means, if you remove the employee entity, this dependent or relative entity is also removed. You can see there. If you remove employee, right, the dependent will also be removed. That's why it is a weak entity. It is dependent on the employee. Dependent entities dependent on employee. That's why when you remove the employee, dependent entity will also be removed. Hope you are understanding, guys. So how you describe that weak entity means using a double rectangle. To represent that weak entity, you have to use a double rectangle. So I will explain about weak entity in detail in the upcoming videos, right? So relationship type. So to express relationship between any two entities, you have to use a rhombus. For example, what is the relationship between an employee and a department? Employee works for the department. That is the relationship. How to represent that relationship in the ER diagram means you have to use a rhombus, and the relationship name should be included within the rhombus. Hope you are understanding. Right, next, identifying relationship type. So this is a double rhombus. Remember one thing, identifying relationship will be always used with a weak entity. You can see the dependents of dependent. So dependent, you can see there the dependents of relationship is a identifying relationship. So identifying relationship is always used with a weak entity. So don't worry about those identifying things. So I will explain about those what is identifying relationship in a detailed way in upcoming videos. So far you should understand about the notations. So to define the relationship between the weak entity and the entity, you should use a notation double rhombus, that is identifying relationship. Next, attribute. So attribute is represented by a vowel. whatever the attribute you take for an employee, for a department, for example employee name, employee address, all those attributes are represented in a oval, and oval attached with a straight line to the particular entity. Next, key attribute. Key attribute, for example, in a employee, SSN is the key attribute. For a department, name is the key attribute, number is the key attribute. The key attribute is represented using a oval, but underline you should use along with the oval for the key attribute. That is the notation. So multi-valued attributes is represented using a double oval. So for example, degree of the employee can be a multi-valued attribute. Locations of the department can be a multi-valued attribute. Department have multiple locations, so that multi-valued attribute can be represented using two ovals, double ovals. Next, composite attribute. I told you address. Composite attribute is address, right? That composite attribute can be represented by ovals, right? Different ovals attached with a straight line to the main attribute. For example, see address of the employee. So you can see the notation. A composite attribute, to represent the composite attribute, to represent address, I can use this multiple ovals. Hope you are understanding. Derived attribute. Derived attribute is age. Age is an example of a derived attribute. I can use a dotted oval to represent the derived attribute. For example, age of an employee. What I can use a dotted oval. Dotted oval can be used to represent the derived attribute. Next, total participation. I'll explain all these things: total participation, cardinality ratios, and the structural constraints in the upcoming videos. So far, you should understand that total participation means between the two entities. If a total participation is there between the two entities, that is E1 and E2, you should use a double line between the entities, double line. For example, here total relationship can be represented between employee and a department. That means all the employees can work for department. All the employees here working for the same department. So you can represent that employee department relationship with total participation. If you are representing that total participation, you should use double lines connected to the entities and the relationship type. Cardinality ratio means to represent that 1:1 relationship, or 1:n, or m:n. I will explain that in a more detailed way in the upcoming videos. For example, here n number of employees can work for one department. You can see that 1,1, that is one employee can work for one department, like that. Or why n number of employees can work for one department. So these type of cardinality ratios can also be represented using the brackets. You can represent that cardinality ratio within the brackets, right? Or else you can represent the cardinality ratio between the relationship, between the rhombus also, right? So these are the notations you are going to use to write the ER diagrams, right? And structural constraint, minimum, maximum. For example, you can see there between the employee and the department, between the works per relation, there is a 4, n. What is that? 4, n, minimum maximum ratio. That is structural constraint. Minimum 4 employees should work for the department. Maximum n number of employees can work for the department. Hope you are understanding. 4, n, 4 number, minimum employees. What is the minimum number of employees? 4. What is the maximum number of employees? N. This is structural constraint. I can include the structural constraints also within the brackets, right? Hope you are understanding, guys. I tried to make it simple. If you have any doubts, please post your doubts in the comment section. Thank you for watching the video.